want the caller to please call me on the number that I had called. I cannot answer the call from the number that you are calling on. Please, I am engaged on that. You can call on the main number that I am using, and I'll bring you to Biafrans. Before I was distracted by that, I want to assure every Biafra, I want to let every Biafra know that you should not wait for these people to defend you. You cannot wait for these people to defend you. You must rise up to defend yourself. Remember what the governor of Bauchi State said some time ago. The governor of Bauchi State said that everybody must arm themselves to protect themselves. Now is that time. You should not wait for those who are killing you to also defend you. I have seen a lot of people rise up and say, oh, Nigeria Army, please protect us. Nigeria Army, please, Nigeria government, please do not do that. The only responsibility you have right now is to find a way to support those who are defending the land, to support ESN, to support IPOB, and defend yourself. That is your responsibility right now. We are rounding up. And as we round up, I want to bring in Mazi Elochukwu Ohage. Mazi Elochukwu, I want you to talk to Biafrans once more. I want you to give us a closing remark, and next week we will continue from where we stopped this evening. Thank you. I hope you heard me, Mazi. Please go ahead. Give Biafrans your closing remark. I am not sure what is happening. I think he cannot hear me. So I want to encourage every Biafran to pay attention, to understand that security, the issue of security, is not just left for one person. I don't know if you can hear me, Mazi Elochukwu. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now. Before it was muted.
Okay.
Hello?
Okay, please go ahead. Give Biafra.
Hello? It's muted again.
You are
Hello?
coming out clearly.
Okay. It was muted before. So can you repeat what you what is it?
Okay, I asked you to give closing remarks to your friends.
Okay. So all I can say to Biafrans is thank you so much for listening today, and I want us to be vigilant. I want us to understand that whatever that glitters are not gold. I also want us to know that not everybody that shouts Biafra, Biafra, Mazi Nnamdi is for freedom. I also want us to know that in this march for freedom, that whoever that tell you that he love Mazi Nnamdi but hate IPOB leadership is an enemy and never a comrade. If we know all these things, then we must look forward to protecting this structure laid down by Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. And with it, because this is the only hope we have for a better tomorrow. This is the only hope we have to bring down whatever the West have built in their own places down to this place. This is the only way we can bring back our people that have stayed more than 30 years abroad down to our place to develop it. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Mazi Elochukwu Ohage. Mazi Elochukwu Ohage, this is not the first time that he joined us here on Radio Biafra. We were here 2 weeks ago, and we started this conversation about insecurity in Biafra land. I want next week for us to be more interactive. I apologize for my inability to have answered calls. I received calls, but they were on the wrong platform, and but next week we have to uh, um, answer more, talk to more people. And if you are there, you are listening, and you feel like there is something that you need to contribute, and you want to be here with me sharing information, do not hesitate to get in touch with me, and we will do the needful, because they say information is power. Um, Information that is put into practice is power. And do not forget that we will still be here tomorrow, 5 Biafra time until 7, just like we will be here next week, Sunday, to continue this conversation. Next week, Sunday, we'll be talking about the military attacks on our communities. Recall that this insecurity has been traced back to the government of Nigeria. And recall that they actually even recruit terrorists into the army. Next week, we'll be talking about the military attacks on Igbo communities. And we know that several of our communities have been attacked. And I also want to talk about, next week, we'll also talk about something that somebody brought to their attention this evening. I do not know how true that is, that some streams were being poisoned, or source of water for our people was being poisoned. I hope our people pay due diligence and understand that this issue of insecurity is not one that only a group of people should handle. People like only ESN to handle them needs your support. It is not something that they can handle alone. No, they need your support. The fact that there is insecurity in our land means that we have work to do. We have a very, very huge work to do. So I thank you once more, and I thank you for being part of this program this evening. I really, really thank you, and I ask you to please be part of this next week. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening. Bye.
This is Constructive Argument on Radio Biafra with Mazi Aloha. Bring your argument. To welcome back once again. Of course, it is Radio Biafra. This is Hello Motherland, and I thank you all for joining us this evening for History Lesson.
Mazi.
Good evening and welcome to Constructive Argument. Thank you very much, Mazi. We need to go ahead straight. It is an hour that we have this evening. If you can take it from now to the top of the hour, Biafrans are listening. Please go ahead.
Greetings to all Biafrans. Regards to our leader, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, and we pray shortly that he be released. It's been a privilege and an opportunity to share with you the history that brought Biafra about. And we're still in the history. It's dynamic, it has not stopped. And we are therefore living the history. So before further ado, so the usual protocol for everyone respected, thank you all for listening. So let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, strength of my Redeemer. Sing. Mazi Ike, some of the tracks you played are quite interesting. Thank you for playing this track. I was trying to sing Always Away before, which that is exactly where we were before Biafra was declared. My talk this evening will be from Aburi to the declaration of Biafra, because that's when everything unraveled. Most of you understand the Aburi Accord. Events are led to it, but after the Aburi, until the 30th of May, things moved very, very fast. And therefore, I'm going to try and unmask as much of it as possible. I'm also happy listening to Assam Pity Special, and when you played it. It's one of those music where when you go to a party in those days, those who can't dance, so those who have 2 feet like me, and those who are sitting on the wheelchair, those who have got delay actually get up and dance.
Oh my goodness me!
And then the Ikenga's
Superstar.
Long Live Africa. The interesting thing about that one was with the group of Biafran soldiers, when they got out of when the war ended, they had nothing much to do, no employment, so they formed bands, and that was one of the tracks from that group. It's a party shaker, as in those days. So thank you for playing them.
It's a pleasure.
We're going back to this Aburi. What exactly happened from the 4th and 5th of January 1960s was that an attempt was made to calm nerves, to find a solution to how do you now live together in a country where a section of population have been massacred. They ran back to their villages, awaiting further instructions. They told the Ojukwu, don't go. You can't trust these people. He said, let's go this extra mile. They went there, they discussed, they came up with solutions that will save the country and unite everybody, and they tried to patch things up. At the end of the accord, Ojukwu and Gowon were eating with the same plate. Most of you will see the video. I think Gowon put a meatball in his mouth and Ojukwu picked some rice. And none of them used a long spoon or a long fork. They were eating from the same plate. So something very, very strange happened when they got back, Ojukwu to the eastern part and Gowon to Lagos. What we believe happened was that Gowon was given some strange instructions. And rather than announce as now the head of the government, remember, before Aburi, Gowon was not recognized by Ojukwu as the head of the government because he had a coup. At that moment in time, the commander-in-chief, Major General J.T. Aguiyi was missing, although we knew he was killed. He was not being declared as killed because Gowon took over power. So it was at Aburi that Gowon was conferred the actual privilege of being the supreme head of the Nigerian government by the Eastern delegation. Because up until then, the East have not recognized him. So people forget to know that. So Ojukwu had to recognize Gowon, who is if you like, hasn't got a higher rank than Ojukwu himself in the military. But in the military, it depends on the rank. Gowon rank is less than Adebayo. who was the governor of the West, is no more than Ojukwu's one, because about the same. In fact, the person ruling the Navy was more superior than all of them. Yet Gowon, because of people backing him with a gun, made him the head of state. So at the gunpoint, he was made head of state, but it was Laburi that they all agreed, including Ojukwu, that he should be pronounced the head of state. When he got back, therefore, Ojukwu couldn't announce everything that was decided at Aburi. He had to wait for Gowon to do so. On arriving, rather than announce it, Gowon gave the impression he was ill. He had a cold. He couldn't make the announcement. People were looking at Ojukwu, what did you guys discuss? Ojukwu said, well, you just have to wait. It went well, we're okay, and so on and so forth. So, days passed by, nothing happened. A few days further, nothing happened. So, Ojukwu began to think, what is going on? So this is really where Nigeria unhinged. Because what was happening at this stage was Gowon was getting instructions from his permanent secretaries and perhaps from foreign people who were advising him that these three people decided that Aburi is not going to work because it's going to be a way of dividing Nigeria, pushing them into a confederacy instead of one country united. But what they forgot was that what they decided at Aburi was a way of patching something that was broken. They are one country still, but what was decided was to have individual regions running their affairs. You can't have an Igbo person now going back to the north because Ojukwu told them to return and they were killed. You can't say that a second time. No one will listen to him. They've been chased out of Lagos. They can't go back. There's no guarantee for their safety. So there's a need for them to stay in their separate regions until temper cools. Okay? So that was what people misinterpreted as confederation. If you're running the eastern region, you're going to have a police force, your army, your area of command, you look after that area. The same for the north, the same for the west, the same for the Midwest. So that's what was agreed. And they agreed on certain formulas on how to share their revenues and resources and so on and so forth. But if you then start going back on those terms, and they're supposed to, part of the clause, if you change a clause, you have to talk to other governors of those regions so you have concurrence. Everyone agrees. So no one is left out, no one is pushed away, there's no suspicion. So all these things was in place as a safety. And the Ojukwu's group and the rest of Nigeria's group, their secretaries, they read through the minutes of the communique, the minutes of the discussion. Ankara himself, the Ghanaian head of state, also went through it and asked them, are you people happy with this? Yes. Would you want to change anything? They said no. They signed it. Ojukwu and Gowon apparently was driven to their respective airports or planes by Ankara himself, and both of them sat in the same car. So it was very, very strange when Gowon started talking about things which was not decided and signed, gramophone, tape-recorded conversations at Aburi. So I've been emphasizing this Aburi because if Ojukwu tell people to go back to the north and they were killed, he can't say that again. He goes to Aburi and they make a statement, and then you don't agree on or honor that statement, they're not going to listen to him anymore. Remember, at this stage, there's nowhere safe to go and have a conversation or have meetings in Nigeria up until then. So it was a very strange situation. So I summarize it by pulling out a comment which Ojukwu made in when the confusion started. Gowon eventually made a statement and started retracting, changing what was published in Aburi. So Ojukwu, I just pulled this out, he said, anybody who was present at Aburi meeting and has read the minutes the communique, the statements, verbatim report, in other words, line by line, would be surprised that a person who calls himself a head of state, now you were talking about Gowon, could so deliberately mislead accredited representatives of foreign governments by saying that the implementation of each item of the conclusions required prior detailed examination by the administrative and professional experts in the various fields. Put in a simple language, you as head of government, the highest authority in the land, have gone and made a decision. You then come back, it's like the cabinet in the UK, the government in the UK have gone somewhere, made a decision. You then come back and your permanent secretary say, no, we're not going to agree with this plan. You tell them what to do. They don't tell you what to do. And the delicate nature of the situation is such that your permanent secretary can only advise you. They can't change the content of the communique. So Gowon was saying, hiding behind the permanent secretary, he said, these people are giving us a different advice, but they're not running the country. You are. Okay. So the conclusions in Aburi were no proposals, but decisions. That's what Ojukwu is saying. They were not proposals. We're not proposing this is what we ought to do. These were decisions taken by the highest authority in the land. Okay. So this topic is called On Aburi We Stand. So if the highest authority in the land are taking decision concluded in Aburi, how can you then start changing it unilaterally? Remember, part of the content was if you change it, you have to get the concurrence. Everybody who signed the paper have to agree. You can't then change it unilaterally and expect everybody else to agree with you. So it doesn't work that way. So-called gentleman's agreement. They're officers and gentlemen. They should honor what is signed. Not that honoring it is going to devalue or put any other part of Nigeria into a, if you like, under bondage. By honoring it, you're respecting every part of Nigeria equally. You're not victimizing anybody. You're trying to soothe or find a balm for those who have been injured and try and alleviate their suffering. You're not there to dictate to anybody. So then he says that what happened, in fact, Ojukwu was saying, was that specific matters, namely the decrees and section of decrees to be repealed, the mechanics of army reorganization, the question of rehabilitation refugees were referred to experts. You have made a decision, now experts, you go ahead and do it. Okay, so the meeting of the financial experts to be considered the question of rehabilitation, displaced persons, has not been held because the Ministry of Finance has not come round to doing that. Okay, the meeting would serve any useful purpose. They haven't done that. So the army experts met and reached agreements, but these were rejected. So the finance people have not met yet. Then Ojukwu continued to say, Lieutenant Colonel Gowon told the heads of missions, now this is very important, you are the head of government, so people want to know what happened in Aburi. Remember, the British want to get hold of this information because Nigeria was created by them, Nigeria is owned by them. Whatever decision you made, it's like you're having your own constitution. Every constitution prior to then was made in London. Your 53 constitutions, Macpherson's, Richards, all these constitutions were made outside Nigeria. Now this one, you're making it in Ghana. And you came back, it's going to alter whatever the British have organized. They don't want to hear it. They want to make sure they understand it. So, Ojukwu said Lieutenant Colonel Gowon told the heads of missions that the agreement about returning the regions to the position before January 17th, that also meant, in effect, that the federal government in Lagos will continue to carry on its function as before. That is right. In other words, what they did in Aburi was to say all the decrees issued by the military since January 66, we're going to repeal them. We're going to cancel them. because Aguirre wanted the country to be united in unitary, Decree 34, but they've decided that Aburi, we're going to cancel all those, okay? We're no longer going to go ahead with those. But then Ojukwu said that Gowon failed to inform the world that the decision taken at Aburi, the federal government meant no more than the Supreme Military Council. Okay, no one, of course, who knows the sort of advice Gowon was receiving in Lagos would be surprised by the suppression and distortion of the truth. So he said that Gowon has already started changing what was decided. So he says the actual Aburi decisions, for those who are following the history, reads as follows. Members, Ojukwu said, agree that the legislative and the executive authority of the Federal Military Council government should remain in the Supreme Military Council, to which any decision affecting the whole country should be referred for determination, provided that, were it possible for the meeting to be held, then the matter requiring determination must be referred to military governors for their comments and concurrence. If you make a decision, you've got to allow all the governors to come together and make a decision. Okay? I'm going to go very quickly because there are various things Ojukwu said in this statement which is rebutting what Gowon was saying, dishing out to the foreign press and saying, this is what we talked about in Aburi. So Ojukwu said, no, these are not what we said. And he therefore decided the best thing to do is to come up with the idea of playing this long gramophone if necessary, okay? So that everybody would know what was decided. He said it's a clear statement, the questions are prepared to distort the verbatim. So it is clear, he summarized, that Gowon was prepared to distort the statement, okay, of the verbatim report of a Aburi meeting. And therefore to help the public informed the Eastern Nigerian Broadcasting Service will be playing the tape records, yes, and proceeding live at scheduled times. Arrangements have been made to transform these tape recordings into long-playing gramophone records. He said, we are also going to ahead to print and publish the documents and records of our Aburi meeting. We in the East, he said, are anxious, and that's to say the least, to see that our difficulties are resolved by peaceful means and that Nigeria is preserved as a unit. But it is doubtful, and the world must judge, whether Lieutenant Colonel Gowon attitudes and their exhibitions of his insincerity are something which can lead to a return of normalcy and confidence in the country. That's a very damning thing to say. He said, I must warn all Easterners once again to remain vigilant. The East will never be intimidated, nor will she acquiesce, in other words, agree, to any form of dictation. It is not our intention to play the aggressor. Nonetheless, it is not our intention to be slaughtered in our beds. We are ready to defend our homeland. Fellow countrymen and women, on Aburi we stand. There will be no compromise. God grant us peace in our time. So this is really, I had to read that out so we all understand that when the people said on Aburi we stand, it is the last bus stop. There's nowhere else to go if Nigeria reneged or messed up the Aburi Accord. So that is the reason why I'm drumming on this. Okay, so Ojukwu therefore fired that warning to Gowon. He should stop meddling, trying to tinker the agreement that was agreed. Don't try and change it. Start implementing it. Okay? If you don't want to implement it, well, I'll have no choice but to find a way of resolving the problem for those people who are desperate to need help from the government. Remember, the people of Eastern origin have been killed. And the government is supposed to be running around to sort things out. But they're not doing that. That is where it's hurting the East a lot. January 26, Gowon held a press conference in Lagos, which he reported to reveal the agreement of the Aburi meeting. Remember, he had a meeting and said, this is what we decided. Ojukwu was saying, my goodness, this is not what we talked about. So the text of the press conference appears to be based not on the minutes of the final agreement Aburi, but on the criticisms of those documents by the permanent secretaries. Reading the two press secretaries, reading two side by side, one wonders whether Gowon was really present at Aburi. So that's how bad the disparity between what Gowon was saying and what was discussed. It's like somebody else who wasn't even there was talking about it, criticizing what they decided. But that isn't what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be implementing what was happening. Okay? So, Ojukwu then went on to say that if the Aburi agreement are not fully implemented by the 31st of December, okay? If you don't implement them by 31st of March, of 1967. Remember, the conference was held on the 4th and 5th of January. February went, March just faffing around, doing nothing, exchange of words, playing with press. So Ojukwu said if by 31st the agreements we decided have not been acted upon because it's the Eastern people who need most help. The refugees need rehabilitated. If you're not going to implement it, Ojukwu said, I shall have no alternative but to feel free to take whatever measures may be necessary to give effect in this region to those agreements. What is he saying? If the central government in Lagos are going to run away from their responsibility, I, Ojukwu, will do something to help those who are in desperate need of rehabilitation. Okay? So that is how far the Aburi Accord had degenerated. Okay? So then what happened was that Ojukwu was then, because the significance of 30th of March is to do with financial year. So whatever has happened, 1966, we're now going to finish in financial year, it's a bit like the British one, 31st of March, because the 1st of April is the beginning of the new financial year. So whatever we've done, at the end of the financial year 31st, we need to decide what to do going forward. Okay. So, on the 31st, so therefore there's something called Survival Edict. Okay? Revenue Allocation Edict. Let me explain that. When the 1st of April came, the East felt necessary that from there on, when we collect taxes, rather than pay direct to the government in the Lagos, we use it to look after those who are in need of rehabilitation. That was step one, in the beginning of the headaches that led to Nigeria unraveling. Okay? So, for 4 months since Aburi, nothing has happened. Right? So, therefore, one of the reasons that Ojukwu did that was to make sure these people did not starve. Some salaries haven't been paid. Okay? And so on and so forth. I'll read a bit more for you. Right. So, when Ojukwu said this is what he's going to do, on the day the departure of Eastern Nigeria was fully expected, journalists arrived in Enugu for a press conference. Because when Ojukwu said that, people rushed to Enugu to go and hear what was going on. Okay? So, instead, they're still playing they're still talking about one Nigeria. Ojukwu told them that he was issuing a revenue edict, appropriating all federal revenue collected in the East as a means of paying for the rehabilitation program. Remember, they've started a rehabilitation program, but no one was funding it. And Aburi, of course, was supposed to fund it, but it wasn't. So Ojukwu had to collect taxes to fund it. So the decree did not affect oil revenues. Very, very important. Ojukwu didn't say those who are in the East collecting money and selling oil should pay me revenue direct. Nigeria will be threatened because they need that oil money. So Ojukwu is saying these are the tax we collected from people, company taxes and so on. Because the oil revenue, interestingly, is paid direct to Lagos. So Ojukwu was not asking for that. He's asking to collect tax and use the tax which he collects from the East, rather than handing over to the Lagos, use it for the rehabilitation. Okay. So now, as Ojukwu said, this decree did not affect oil, as I said, and these were collected late. Now, the reporter was stunned. All the reporters were amazed. He said, how come? They had expected fire and brimstone, therefore to confront and say the physical problem that Ojukwu was pulling out. Ojukwu wasn't pulling out. He was trying to find a peaceful way of resolving the problem. So Ojukwu told them that the East would only pull out of Nigeria if she were attacked or blockaded. Okay? So here we go. People rushed in to go and hear Ojukwu when he says, if by the 31st nothing happened, we'll do this. So they came and they want to hear, when are you pulling out from Nigeria? When's they seceding? She said, we're not seceding, but we will consider, we'll pull out of Nigeria if we are attacked or blockaded. Remember, the people in the East are now mixed up of those who are returnees from Lagos, from Ibadan, from Ilorin, from Sokoto, from Kanu, from Kaduna. They've all run back and with nothing doing, most of it. So the federal government, instead of doing something about what Ojukwu was saying, they gave their own decree, Decree 8. They issued a fresh decree, Decree 8. That's a document that appeared at first glance to implement major points of constitutional arrangement agreed in Aburi. Now this is very tricky. They brought out a paper saying, this is what we're going to do. When you look at it, you think, oh, they're going to agree, they're going to implement Aburi Accord. But it is not the fiscal arrangement. The Decree 8, like Aburi, vested the legislature and executive powers of the Supreme Council. And what it did, the decisions was made. Vital matters could be taken only by agreement with only two governors. But however, it gives autonomy. The federal government have the final say of what they did or who did what, which is against what Aburi said. Aburi said we'll all have to agree as a way of removing suspicion. But if you then bring out a decree saying the federal government have the right to veto and decide what to do, you're no longer going in the spirit of Aburi. Remember, there's tension in the country. So, what then happened is this. 4 months after the Aburi, they printed a new version, and it's very, very clever. Skillfully, they worded that, and it looks harmless indeed when you look at it, but you have to look at the main paragraph. It says, one of the extra clauses was that the fact that the regional governors could not exercise their powers, right? If you're Ojukwu, you're not allowed to exercise your power so as to impede the prejudice, the authority of the federation. Translated, it means Ojukwu cannot do anything without the prior consent of the Ogowan in the central government, and anything that the central government feels is going to undermine them, they will not allow it to go through. So if Ojukwu wants to feed his people, and the central government says, I'm not going to allow you, then it will not go through. So they'll be dictating to the East, which is not what agreement was reached at Aburi. So the next one, so Gowon decides precisely what he would impede. So Gowon is the one who decides what would impede or what would prejudice the authority. It's like a rule you made, you haven't decided what is actually inside it. But you say, I have every right to change this particular rule. But you don't tell us what the rules are. Okay. Another section of the Decree 8, which was brought out after Juku decided to collect tax from his region. And the federal government, Decree 8, said to take over the authority of the regional government, which was endangering the continuance of the federal government. And again, the creation was, the criteria was again apparently Lagos. So there's another part of this new clause, which Gowon issued unilaterally, that within it, the central government have the right to take over any region if they deem that they're going away from the dictates of the center. It's like imposing a dictatorship, and which they have not decided at Aburi. The next one, most menacing of all, the Eastern Eyes. And this is important. The important thing here was a paragraph under which a state of emergency. Now, this is very critical. Remember, Tafawa Balewa government used state of emergency in the Middle Belt, state of emergency in the Western region, just to bring the army and start shooting and killing people and causing all sorts of chaos. You have Wild Wild West as a result of state of emergency. Now, Gowon is bringing that within this Decree 8, the government in Lagos has the right to declare the state of emergency, right, on any region when, with the agreement of only 3 of the military governors. Why only 3? Remember, there were 4: Northern, Western, Midwest, and East. So you don't no longer need concurrence of all the people. You can only now use only 3. So what that means, you're isolating the East. So if they go it alone, 3 of you will gang up and declare a state of emergency. So that is what made the East very, very suspicious. You have now brought in a new decree without concurrence, without discussion, and saying 3 governors, if they agree to go ahead. Okay? And the other 3 governors, they are not independent. The governor in the West has northern soldiers camped in his country. The Midwest hasn't got enough firepower. So whatever the center says, Gowon says will go, because the others cannot say no. So Juku was being isolated. So Juku saw this as being specifically anti-East. So that decree was not saying anything to alleviate the suffering, the burden of refugee, the rehabilitation program, but everything was against the East. So he therefore rejected the decree. So therefore, there was growing unpopularity of Gowon's regime, okay, is now causing the southern part of Nigeria to actually become one, because they're looking at him and said, what is going on here? We went to Aburi, and you're giving a new order without any instruction to anybody beforehand. So now, Q, the Western region, the Yoruba people, there was growing resentment over the failure, first of all, to remove the northern troops who are sitting in Ibadan, who are garrisons in Lagos, in Ikeja. So they wanted them returned to the north, because that's what Aburi said. But Gowon wasn't budget, okay, because that's what was stated. So Chief Awolowo led the actual protest. Following this tradition, so it's made among the, as you know, Chief Awolowo was locked up in prison. They accused him of sedition under Balewa's government. He was released by Agi Irensi, but Gowon, when Agi Irensi was killed, the day Awolowo was going to be released, Gowon jumped in and released him. So the Yoruba think that Gowon released Awolowo. So Awolowo is now at large in the West and is following what is going on. So he mentioned to the leaders of thought in the West, these are the powerful people in the Western region, Yoruba leaders of thought. They all met in Ibadan. And he said it's in his considered opinion that some of the demands from the East are actually, they're not altogether perfect, but he said they're excessive. Within the context of the Nigerian Union, most of such demands are not only well-founded, he thinks they're well-founded, but are designed for smooth and healthy association within the various nations units in Nigeria. And what are we saying, in effect, that most of what the Eastern region are demanding are reasonable, and they are designed to allow them to cohabit with the rest of Nigeria. So Chief Awolowo, who has been to the East to see Ojukwu, and as a witness, and he was the one who would understand the feelings in the East, because if you've been there, as one of the music was playing, Onwuzuruwa, it was played. Everybody was a big town, because you have a relative who went to the north who may not have returned, some from Lagos who didn't make it, some who maybe have wounds. So you are constantly reminded of the pressure that the Eastern region were under. So there was a lot of sympathy for the refugees to go. Awolowo, who went to the East to see, to feel the pain of the East and understand their concerns and the anxiety over the Aburi Accord not being implemented. So, to cut a long story not so short, Gowon said, Awolowo said, if the East decided to pull away by one reason or the other, by omission or commission, the West will have no choice but also consider pulling out of the Federation. So this rattled Gowon, because he feels that if the East pull away, the West pull away, then Nigeria more or less is finished. And the Northerners, they will have a real job if they're going to attack the East, going it alone. Remember, Nigeria is on a tripod, North, East, and West. So if the North can get the West on their side, then they can bully the East. Likewise, if the East and West could come together, this handshake across the bridge, this River Niger, this handshake across the River Niger, the North cannot dictate too much to those two together. So, Gowon has a decision to make. Okay, so this is how he solved his problem. Remember that the North and the West were somewhat in collusion in this tripod thing, because the Obas of Yoruba land in October 66, they went up to the North to thank the Emirs for not killing the Yorubas. Let me just explain that. Up in the North, there were Yoruba people and Eastern people. There were Westerners and Easterners. They were all in the North. The Northern pogrom, they planned to just get rid of the Igbos. Sometimes when the Igbos escape from their house and they run into the Yoruba, if you're lucky, the Yoruba person can help you. If you're a real friend. If you're real enemies, they say they're not going to help you or they chase you out. So the Yorubas were large extent spared. Remember I said last time, you can tell if somebody's Yoruba, most of them have tribal marking. If they're Hausa, you also have tribal marking, but the Igbos didn't have so much tribal marking. So you can identify in that sense. So the Obas of Yoruba land, the chiefs and elders, they went up to the north and thanked the Emirs for sparing the Yorubas. So that's number one. Now, so they're beginning to work together to make sure their people are not, exposed to killings. But they have military camped in Ibadan and in Lagos, ready to pounce. These are the same military that was helping Tafawa Balewa's military. I mean, Tafawa Balewa's First Republic in suppressing the West because of the wild West, all the commotion that were going west. So I'm just saying that as a by the way. Awolowo, therefore, Gowon and Awolowo need to work together with the Obas of the West to make sure the Yoruba people are safeguarded. So what then happened was that it was in late April. Remember, we started this call from January 67. We're now in April. So Awolowo went and said that if the East pulled out, once again, the West would pull out. So this was a big, big problem for Gowon and the Northern and the those who are plotting and planning how to dominate Nigeria. So what the Northerners did then, because they can sense the feeling in the East, they can also sense the feeling in the West. So they have to find a way of dividing them. So what they did, the Northerners suddenly changed their mind and said that they will now welcome any plan to divide the North into more states. That's a master coup. If you say you're going to now make the North, allow it to be divided in many states, this is exactly what Awolowo was looking for, because the North was like a monolith, one block. If you have a way of dividing them so they have different states, that will weaken them to allow someone like Awolowo, the East, to operate. The North has always refused dividing the North. So the leaders in the North came up with this idea. Okay? They were, before that, irrevocably committed. They were not allowing any sense of talking about Middle Belt or Far North or whatever. So for the first time, they decided they're now committed to creation of states. I don't know if anybody really appreciates the significance of this. So with that, that is the carrot that Gowon needs to weaken the growing link between Awolowo and Ojukwu. Okay? Because Awolowo loves to hear that the North could be divided into states. And the Northerners said this like carte blanche. North should be irrevocably committed to the creation of states, whether or not they are created elsewhere. Let me repeat that. They don't mind the northern region being divided to various states, and that is whether or not other states in other regions are divided into states anyway, because one of these states is bigger than the East put together anyway, if they divided them. So, on the basis of the stability of the North, also the entire federation, to urge the federal government to take immediate steps to set in motion the machinery for the creation of these states. So we are now around, I think, April 67. So the Northerners suddenly decided, we don't mind states being created, by the way, and you can create them without creating states everywhere else. So Gowon picked up on this complete change of heart. He picked up on that and decided that it would be a good idea to create new states. So Gowon now started talking about new state creation. This appealed or appeased Awolowo's sentiment. On top of it, Gowon approached Awolowo and made him the Commissioner for Finance and the Deputy Chairman of the Supreme Council in this new government, where he's bringing some civilians into government. So it's like a military, civilian, if you like, government. But no one from the East, of course. So you have in the federal government, Gowon bringing Awolowo in, and then he went and found Chief Nahoro, who was in prison with Awolowo, is also being released. Chief Inaho is from it's a minority tribe from the Middle West. So he brought him into the government. He brought in Joseph Taka, who is the mid-belt, actually, TV's, it's not the core north. So what Gowon did there was to widen and weaken the broad base in the north by pulling in, bribing Awolowo with the finance ministry job and chairman of this government, so that Awolowo is no longer going to go close to the east. He's divided them away from the east. In so doing, he isolated the east and pulled the government of Nigeria into one. So you have the north with the military and the western part now singing from the same hymn sheet. So that isolated the Ojukwu and the east. Having done that, he would then turn to the east. So let me go a little bit quicker. So what then happened is that when Ojukwu decided from the 1st of April to collect the revenue for survival edict and pay to people in this region who are suffering, need rehabilitation, what Gowon did was to cause an economic blockade in the east. He stopped the postal service. He did the postal orders, the cables, the telephone, the telex. So there's no form of communication. Why? Because it all goes through Lagos. So you can't communicate outside eastern Nigeria to other countries. So he cut that off. He brought the boat and is sure nobody should sail into the east. So he blockaded. So the east is now being cut off and the war hasn't even started. And as I mentioned in some of the talks, things like salt started becoming a scarce commodity because you're not importing anything. So an Ojukwu who's collecting tax to help rehabilitate his people, now finding there are no boats coming in and you can't phone outside to complain to anybody. And then on top of it, the planes coming into the east were also cut off. You're not allowed to fly in. Nigerian Airways was also banned from flying to the east. So you're already being surrounded and cut off. So Ojukwu then had a press conference with Reuters, and he said, I think we are now rolling downhill. Yeah? So he said it would take a great deal to halt the momentum. We are very close. Very, very close. What that means is that if you're now going to cause an economic blockade in the east, remember what Ojukwu said, there are two ways of killing somebody. You put a gun and shoot them, or you can starve them to death, which is in a way prophetic, because that's exactly what Nigerians use. They use starvation as a weapon of war. He's blockaded these people already, cut them off from international contact, and the war hasn't even started. So Ojukwu was saying, if they invade us or blockade us, we will succeed. It's like Gowon is taking, each time Ojukwu says something, Gowon tightens the noose and tries to push him towards secession. It's like he's being pushed away from Nigeria. But Gowon at the same time is securing the western part to support him in this coming war. Okay? Someone would ask, what's happened to the Midwest? Well, Midwest said they were going to be neutral. Ejo was neutral. Ejo is the military governor of the Midwest. He wasn't getting involved. He wanted his zone to be neutral. So, we're now May 20th. So, what then happened is that there were still people, just Ojukwu said, we're now very close. They were pulling apart. So, last-ditch effort. To be fair, this time it was the National Conciliation Committee, headed by the new Federal Chief Justice, Sir Adetokunbo Ademola, is a Yoruba person, and then including Awolowo. They visited Ojukwu for the last time, the 7th of May, 1967. Once again, they listened to Ojukwu's views, they listened to the problems they're having, they accepted all his demands, and called on the federal government to implement these demands. These demands included implementation of what was agreed in Aburi, okay, and also the troops back to their regions of origin, and the call of the economic sanction. Okay, so the people who visited Ojukwu went back to Gowon and said, these people are being tortured unnecessarily. You need to call off all the sanctions. They don't make sense. So on the 20th of May, Gowon accepted all the recommendations, but it was another illusory hope. He said he's agreed to now de-escalate, but he announced that the ban on Nigerian Airways flight to the east was lifted, although with other sanctions. Yeah. However, the director of Nigerian Airways said privately, no one had told him, given an order to resume flights, so he wasn't going to carry that out either. So Gowon will say one thing, but behind, something else was going on.